Hey guys, it's Jay, here with another review video. Before the review begins, I'd like to ask if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share with others. Without further ado, onto the vid. The episode begins with Shay surrounded by Patmo's guards. One of them instructs Gary to sign some papers, while Sir Horseman outlines the fact that Gary has been federally pardoned by the head of code, Chairman Aldrich Ross, and his sentence has been revoked for a classified reason. Sir Horseman then questions the first table and says he's never understood their actions, but he feels this one in particular is unacceptable. He asks if this was an attempt to intimidate him, sending a Kimyo to knock on his door, walk into his palace, and take what's his. He says to Shay, "We are not mutants like you. You flaunt your chi amongst your own kind as a show of force, striking fear into each other. We are human. We are immune to your menace. We've all the tools necessary for hunting you, so you do not scare us. All we see is a potential inmate. We do what it takes to maintain peace, even if it costs our own bodies to put out a fire. You best watch your step on this island, Lord Hart." Gary asks what he is to do now, as their plan was perfect, and at the institution he worked for his entire life, he couldn't defend himself when it turned against him. Shay adds that the plan was indeed successful, as even he once hated Gary, but that is in the past, as he will be redeemed while they face justice. He continues by saying he knows Gary's trust has waned, but Code is sending an escort to take him home, and that he will accompany him back, as they have cleaning up to do. Gary then thanks Shay for his kindness, and says he has grown. Shay then glances over at the incubation pods, and Sir Horseman says unlike what Shay and others think, it is for their own safety, as they are not barbaric and they do not torture. But some Kimyos are far too unstable when they arrive, and are dangerous to even themselves. So to avoid another Kevin Morales incident, those pods calm them and reduce their chi until it is almost undetectable by their scanners. He says Shay need not concern himself with them, but what he can thank him for is how quiet he's made the inmates since he took off his sash. Shay then stands there, but opens his eye when a voice says that they feel his rage. Turning his eye and looking upward, Shay sees another Kimyo in an incubation pod. He says he can feel them in his thoughts and asks who they are and how they are doing this. The man responds, "How? A gift perhaps, or maybe a curse given my current position. You need not fear me, young prince. I am an ancient one. I feel the royalty in your blood, the hearts, a bloodline I had met several hundred years ago. Does your clan still fight?" Shay responds that the Heart clan has been defeated, and that he and a few others are what remain. He then says to the Ancient One that though his chi is reduced, it is still very great, and he asks how he is confined there. The Ancient One responds with, "Rest, young prince. After years of fighting their wars, I desire to sleep the sleep of death, yet I cannot die. The Heart clan defeated, They face the same fate as my own clan. I was right to abandon this fight. I have seen men and Kimos at war against each other since before you were a thought, and in my years I have gained wisdom. This is what I have concluded. Abandon them all. None of them know what they fight for anymore. It would be wise to let them be. Run, hide, find a place to call home, and let them kill each other. Watch it unfold and do nothing. This, I have found, is peace." The scene then changes to Veal fighting against the ash creatures. He takes his sword and slashes at the gorilla, then dodges when it slams its fist down, and just after delivers a clean strike with the back of his sword. He then looks toward the raptor, who jumps at him, though Veal ducks under it. Across the way, Lewis draws his bow while his horse gallops. Veal then asks Lewis how ancient the ashes of his fathers are, and to face him with their might, and to not disappoint, and show him why he was allowed to live this long. Lewis then releases his arrows, though they all miss, and the gorilla leaps at Veal, but he responds by kicking it out of the air, sending it into the ground. Veal then comments on how sturdy the gorilla is, but says Lewis is fighting to a pointless end, and the only one who poses a threat to them is Shay, but he is miles away from his calls, and he asks Lewis if he'd really die for him. He says the Inturium Dome hides that place from all aid, so Lewis is alone. He then asks if he has accepted that none will be by his side when he draws his last breath. He adds that many called for Leo Thomas as they died, and they will do the same for the young Lord Hart. He says these symbols of hope are only deception, and that they cannot save him, so when he screams, it is only an incomprehensible, futile plea. The raptor hisses, but it is taken out by a Dothanil tendril. Veal then tells Lewis to come, and as he does, he tells him to forsake hope and bear his own burden, to fight knowing he alone can save himself. He then takes his swords and slashes at Lewis's horse, taking it out. The Lewis jumps over the attack and lands, stepping onto the pterodactyl creature and avoiding a whip attack from Veal. During this, Veal says he fought a former wielder of Lewis's talent over a decade ago, and he does not recall the ash being this heavy, and he asks if that many people in Lewis's family have died and been added to their number since then. He He adds that Lewis walks with a grave on his back, and that he is a tomb of failures, as Lewis's talent thrives on death, and he asks if he thinks that he can stand against an immortal. He then looks down and says Lewis's creatures cannot save him, as he brings them to their extinction. The pterodactyl then flies upward, and Vial flings a blood whip at it, slashing it in half, but notices that Lewis is not riding it. He then appears behind Vial and hits him with his lance, sending him away, though he is caught by Dothanil's tendrils. As Vial wears an annoyed look on his face, Lewis stands above him and tells him to stand up. Now on to the highlights. So everything I want to talk about comes from the Patmos section of the episode, so let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing is the characters in the incubation pods. Now this actual panel was teased by Brent on his Instagram back in March on the 13th. The original thought when we saw these was that this is some form of chemio experimentation being done by Vial. This also could have been a way to show how Vial was potentially cloning his soldiers that Andrea mentions in episode 121. However, this was of course not the case, and Sir Horseman implies that the chemios in these pods are similar to that of Kevin Morales, as they came to Patmos unstable and are a danger to others and themselves. However, Sir Horseman also implies that these chemios are not like Kevin just yet, but have the potential to be like him, as he says, to avoid another Kevin Morales incident, implying that these characters have not yet destroyed their bodies the way that Kevin has, and these pods keep them from reaching a point of doing so. This brings us to the reveal of another character who is in one of these pods, with that being the character this episode is named after. This chemio, who we will refer to as Ancient One, is the same character we see in episode 113 with the Ronin version of Shay. If for some reason you don't think this is the same character, we can prove he is by looking at another version of his character model and comparing it to what we got in this episode. Of course, they have the same orange skin, but if you look closer, they have the same branding dot pattern, which proves they are the same character. A couple immediate questions I have are, what does he look like and will we ever see his face? As well as, why did he cut his hair? Time will really only tell for the first one, but he may have cut his hair as a way to match Shay, who we know also cuts his hair by the time he is Ronin. The fact the Ancient One is in an incubation tube could suggest his chi is unstable like the others, but I think it's more clear this isn't the case based on the conversation itself, and I will look at different parts of said combo. Now Shay says the Ancient One's chi is reduced, but is still very great, and Sir Horseman told us the incubation tubes reduce chi so that they are almost indetectable by their scanners. This means the natural chi of the Ancient One, when unsuppressed, should compare to that of Ilios's. And this isn't a stretch to say, as Ilios himself says Vial's chi compares to his own, so if the Ancient One is as old as he's implied to be, this would make him a god tier equivalent character, which means he would more than likely be the second strongest in Shay's group, as the cowboy strength is currently undeterminable, and the girl was an inexperienced high schooler before she was saved by Shay, making her the weakest by default. Another way we know the Ancient One's chi could compare to Ilios's is that Shay was suppressing his chi when fighting Lath in episode 120, and Jose says what he is revealing is comparable to a 5-year-old. Considering the Ancient One's chi is being reduced even more, but is still great in Shay's eyes, means it should be on that higher level of characters in terms of chi, just like Shay. Moving away from his raw strength and looking at some potential abilities, we see in this episode he expresses two. First, he expresses the ability to feel emotions, as he tells Shay he can feel his rage. Though it's very possible we can chalk this up to all chemios being able to feel Shay's quiet rage that Reed mentions in episode 132. And since the Ancient One is older, he may be able to pick up on this easier. He then expresses the second ability of being able to communicate with another person's thoughts. And this is how he and Shay have their conversation. Though it's very interesting, as the Ancient One clearly implies he isn't aware of how he's able to do this, meaning this could be a more recent development for him. With these abilities in mind, we can guess the Ancient One has a psychic based talent, or at the very least, one of his talent types is psychic, though this could change when we actually see him in action. Moving on to some of his deeper lore, he says he is an Ancient One and that he has met the bloodline of the Heart Clan several hundred years ago. Considering the actual definition of the word ancient, as well as the current year in the story and dating it back several hundred years, this at the very least means the Ancient One was around during Kane's time, but it is very possible he came before him and interacted with the earlier members of the Heart Clan. The Ancient One also says he fought and witnessed other fights, which at the very least imply he is someone who fought during Kane's war. We do also know that not all chemios are good, such as Mato Hagen, who killed his own hand, as well as the existence of Patmos itself. So there's a possibility the Ancient One has fought in other unknown Kimio-related conflict. This leads me into a question I have about him. He says after years of fighting their wars, he desired to sleep the sleep of death, and that he was right to abandon this fight. This shows his clear lack of desire and care for the ongoing conflict, and how he would rather not be part of it. The question I have is, if this is the case, it has been his mentality for years now, why does he join Shay? I think part of the reason may come from him sympathizing with Shay being one of the last members of the Heart Clan, as he himself is seemingly the last member of his own clan. However, I think the true reason he joined Shay is because unlike others, Shay knows what he fights for. In this season, I feel as though Shay very clearly knows his purpose and is doing things to further achieve that goal. His acquisition of Zahara is evidence of this, and Mahalalel tells Shay that Zahara is free to roam, yet she chooses to follow him, meaning a Talon weapon is making a conscious decision to stand by Shay. Mahalalel also tells Shay that even the lost put faith in the fulfillment of his calling, which was in reference to Andrea releasing Pandora's grasp on Zahara due to the trust she has in Shay. If we apply this logic to the Ancient One, we may be able to guess that with his ability to feel Shay's emotions and communicate with his thoughts, another conversation between the two will be had where Shay convinces the Ancient One to aid him in his goal to put an end to Thanatos. I see this being the case due to what Ilios says about the lost putting faith in the fulfillment of Shay's calling, as the Ancient One may find his own conviction in helping someone with a clear goal, and his past connection to the Heart Clan may aid in his desire to help Shay as well. Spinning back to these scars on his body I mentioned earlier, this is known as scarification, and is the practice of creating scars on the body through controlled cutting or branding. In some cultures, these marks can signify high rank or nobility, or can belong to a respected warrior. Considering the Ancient One's clan is also gone, as well as him having mentioned he has fought in wars, could mean he, like the others in the series, come from a clan of warriors, but he himself was a respected member among them. Some of the tribes that practice scarification also tend to cover the face of those individuals, either their mouth or their entire face, with only those close to said individual being allowed to see their face, which could mean only Shay and the other members of the group actually know what the Ancient One looks like, whereas everyone else doesn't, which could mean we may only ever see his real face in official fan art Brent actually does, as opposed to seeing it in the story itself. I also want to take a quick look at Lewis and Veil's fight. Now, Veil says Lewis's creatures are nothing more than distractions, and this is actually very true. Lewis uses every creature outside of the Hydras to distract Veil in some way. The gorilla and the raptor are used to face Veil up close, so Lewis can attempt to land shots with his arrows. The horse is used in Lewis's frontal assault, but also allows him to dodge Veil's attack. The pterodactyl is used in one of the best ways though, as it not only saves Lewis by providing him a place to dodge Veil's whip attack, but then flies upward and completely blocks off Veil's sight of Lewis, just for him to not be there when he attacks the creature. This gives Lewis a definitive opening to attack Veil, which he succeeds in doing. One thing I do like about this fight so far is the actual setting. I think it's really cool to have the two of them fight on Veil's tendrils as opposed to them being on the ground. To end things off, I want to say that I find it very funny that Veil is consistently depicted as someone who doesn't like being hit, as in this episode, Veil is very clearly annoyed at the fact Lewis landed a solid hit on him. He also loses his mind when Bjorn hit him last season, and hated Sabito for the scar he left on his body. I just find it really funny that Veil is this very strong character who is seen as greater than the gods here, but hates to be hit when he's in a fight. Another thing I find funny is that Shay took off the Elder's mantle, which caused the inmates at Patmos to be docile, as his chi is without a doubt large enough to give them that weight-like feeling, or naturally has a hostility to it due to what the actual chi is. Now, I want to look at a theory I saw in the comments by Anthony Dice from last week's video. The most important part of this theory is the last couple sentences, as a couple things in the episode point to Shay not only coming to Trinidad himself, but being involved in Lewis's battle. Of course, Shay says he will escort Gary back to Trinidad, but Veil mentions Shay quite a few times and says he is miles away. This to me foreshadows another Shay versus Veil interaction, which is one I wouldn't have expected just yet, and it aligns with Anthony's theory of Shay being the one to show up and aid Lewis. And lastly, for the comments of the week, I would like to put a spotlight on the Udaxum, who notes that the Ancient One is a character Brent drew a couple years ago, and that we may get a Patmos breakout and a Shay versus Vatic fight. This is a very intriguing comment, as I did mention that the Ancient One is the same character we see is allied with Ronan, but how we get to that point is unknown. It's very clear that Sir Horseman doesn't even like when a human leaves his custody, so there's no way he'd be okay with someone like the Ancient One walking free, which more than likely means Shay has to get/convince the Ancient One to leave with him, which would cause a huge ruckus on the island. And considering Vatic guards Patmos, and Okeanos has a bone to pick with Shay due to him having Thanatos' chi, Honestly, a fight between the two vessels doesn't seem outside of the realm of possibility. But anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned in the highlight section. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well. And I will see y'all in the next one.